Time for our Soapbox Social again. You know, Canucks fever is sweeping the region right now, and Vancouver's Mayor Ken Sim, he hopes FIFA fever is going to make people here feel good about footing the bill for hosting 7 World Cup games next year, which at last estimate, that's going to cost up to $581 million. So here's Mayor Sim on our program yesterday, followed by Jackie Cannelli, a sociology professor at Carleton University.
We're getting the equivalent of 30 to 40 Super Bowls in the city of Vancouver. That's a branding exercise. That's a sales exercise. Think of our restaurants and our hotels and the hospitality industry, the economic impact that will bring over the next 10, 20, 30 years.
There's a study from a group of Harvard economists, not the most radical group of folks, pretty conservative. 2016, they generated a report about the economic impact of mega sporting events, and they concluded that the economic benefits are only possible if non-public funds exceed public funds in hosting the events. This hasn't happened since 1984 at the LA Olympics, and it certainly is not happening here.
So that's Carleton University professor Jackie Cannelli. She was on the show earlier this week. Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim was with us yesterday. The 20 to 30 Super Bowls, by the way, that refers to the number of international viewers to those events. So joining us now with their thoughts is our Soapbox Social panel. Kyla Lee is a Vancouver criminal lawyer for Acumen Law Corporation. Kyla, hello.
Hello.
And Mo Amir is the host of the podcast This is Van Color. Hello to you.
Hi, Gloria.
Mo, what do you think? How many Vancouverites are feeling good about this latest cost estimate for hosting FIFA?
Oh, I think a lot of Vancouverites are actually excited about having the World Cup here, but I don't think they're very excited about the cost estimates. And what's the point of these initial cost estimates when they have no semblance in reality? In 2 years, we've suddenly doubled the costs, but there's no indication that we've doubled the revenue. It just doesn't make sense. And I do think that projects like this require accountability. And it's not enough for the mayor or the minister responsible to say, oh, this is going to be fun, man. And isn't it going to be so cool to see Vancouver on international TV, which I think the mayor also said that as well. It's just not a great investment. I think that there are enough studies to prove that we don't get as much back as we put in. Vancouver is already a tourist destination. The hotels are full in the summer. So this idea that we're going to be boosting tourism doesn't make any sense. Sorry. And I think that we also have to recognize that the bidding process itself gives huge tax breaks to FIFA and the sponsors. And this is all at a time when community events are struggling. We know that the Fringe Festival was struggling, that the Folk Festival was struggling. We don't have a Santa Claus Day parade. We don't have New Year's Day Eve fireworks. We don't have Canada Day fireworks. And we also know that the World Cup is not holding back any tickets for locals. So it just feels like it's a big party for rich people to come and play in the city with very little for the city or the province itself.
Yeah, and what do you think, Mo, of the comparison to the 2010 Olympics? I mean, Jackie Cannelli was talking specifically, Carleton specifically studied the effects of the 2010 Olympics, but are these two completely different beasts, World Cup and Expo?
I think they are completely different beasts, but I think the logic...
Let's throw the 2010 Olympics in there. Sorry, it was the 2010 Olympics that they were
I think the Olympics
on.
and the World Cup are completely different beasts. There was a lot of events during the Olympics and a lot of sporting events to enjoy. But at the same time, I think the logic holds the same. And at the Olympics, you can point to infrastructure upgrades, but those are things that needed to be done anyways. And so maybe, yes, it fast-tracked those. But ultimately, was there a great benefit aside from booming real estate in Vancouver that we all got to enjoy or suffer from post-Olympics?
Kyla, what do you think of the comparisons, first of all, and do you think this is worth the price tag?
I don't think it's worth the price tag. And you know what? I'm going to be embarrassed when the World Cup is here if we're, celebrating the fact that Vancouver is on international TV while people who live in this city can barely afford to live in this city, are not happy, are struggling to access the basic services that they need, and don't feel safe. And here we are acting like we're this world-class city and trying to bring people in from other countries to spend all their money here when most of the people I know can't get by month to month living in the city of Vancouver.
Yeah, it's really interesting just to gauge the kind of public reaction we've had online, on text, and that type of thing. And it really seems to depend on whether you're a soccer fan or not. That's what it comes down to, because for soccer fans, there's nothing like World Cup. There is no comparison. You know, and for them, it's like, bring it on. Whatever it's going to cost, I'm there. But another topic that a lot of British Columbians have strong opinions about is the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. It just became commercially operational yesterday. We may see the first tanker later this month. Now, I spoke with Stuart Muir. He's the CEO of Resource Works on the show yesterday. Stephen Quinn spoke to Margot Venton, a staff lawyer with Eco Justice, this morning on the early edition. Let's just listen to a little of that.
The fact that Canada can break loose of the continental market and instead of discounting its oil and giving it cheaply to the USA, which has been a nice deal for the Americans, but not a good one for Canadians, we're now free of that because we can get this product to the global markets by ocean, by sea transports. And that's really the game changer here.
Also, we have to consider it in the context of all the other shipping projects that are also being approved in the Salish Sea. So we also have the Terminal 2 port expansion at Roberts Bank. We have several LNG projects, which will increase the export of LNG, and those also have to go by ship. So we have a cumulative challenge that needs to be addressed, not on a project by project basis, but overall.
But when we're talking about the project as in the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, Mo, what impact do you think it will have on Canada?
Well, I think it will have a positive economic impact. You know, just by increasing capacity, I think there's a lot of companies in the oil sands that obviously are going to benefit from that. It may create new jobs. You know, there is absolutely going to be a positive economic impact. The risk, of course, is that when we now have exponentially more tankers in our waterways and we have greater risk of leakages or spills, it could be pretty catastrophic. And so I think a lot of people are very fairly worried about that. There's also the risk to the southern resident killer whales. I believe that the 16 recommendations for the federal government were actually not met in terms of being able to protect that wildlife or marine wildlife. So, you know, I'm not an energy expert or an environmental expert, so ultimately time will tell, but I think we cannot discount the environmental risk that we now face.
Right. Well, Mo covered a lot of territory there. Kyla, what impact are you watching for here?
I'm interested to see the political fallout and the social fallout. You know, this is very much a case of sort of the will of the government over the will of a very vocal group of individuals who care about environmental issues and you know, in large part the will of a lot of British Columbians, especially from a prime minister who has historically touted, you know, very important emotional ties to this province. So it's going to be interesting to see how this is sort of played as a hand in the next election, especially if we start to see environmental impacts with the increased tanker traffic. And hopefully we don't see this, but if we do see any type of environmental incidents that occur between now and the election.
Right. Anything you're watching for a longer term, Mo?
I don't know. It just feels like Canada is a big company town, and you can slice that from grocery chains to telecoms to natural resources. It just feels like we're constantly catering to big industry. And of course, there are some positive economic benefits for other Canadians, but ultimately it just feels like those big companies always just get their way.
You know, you're talking big companies as well. We got an update on a story that broke on Sunday. We're still following this. London Drugs says that their phone lines are working again now. Their Canada Post offices are open again. Pharmacists are on site in most locations helping with emergency prescriptions, that kind of thing, other urgent care. But 80 stores in Western Canada closed for 5 days now. What impact are you watching, Mo?
It's going to be interesting to see how this impacts the London Drugs brand. I don't think over the long term it's going to have a big impact, but I think certainly other industries and their competitors are also looking at this thinking, oh, wow, like this can happen. This dystopian nightmare
is that
can
London
happen.
Drugs' fault? I mean,
I don't think so.
Is it just the way that they've handled this, Kyla? I mean, the amount of information that has or has not been forthcoming. Any company could, you know, be hit by cybercrime.
Oh, sure. Cybercrime happens to big companies, little companies, and everybody in between. But I think the way that they've handled this with information has been hugely problematic. By not giving any information initially that this was a cyber attack, it led to very quick speculation misinformation all over social media that this was something to do with, high crime rates and theft and broken windows and all of that. And, it took a long time for that discourse to die down on social media after the announcement. And then without knowing really what's going on, it's also keeping people from being able to feel comfortable that their information is safe. Because London Drugs caters to so many needs for people, postal, pharmacy, medical, people have a lot of information and trust that they've placed in London Drugs to keep that safe. And nobody really knows whether their information is protected right now and the extent of any breaches of very deeply personal information that might be in possession of that company.
When you're talking what kind of meds you might be on and for how long and what that could reveal. Absolutely. What does London Drugs need to do now, Mo, in your view?
Well, building on what Kyla says, I think they need to be very transparent and upfront in terms of what data was breached and how it affects consumers. And that might actually mean reaching out to people on an individual basis as opposed to just putting out a blast. I mean, I think they do need to take accountability, even if it, again, is not necessarily their fault.
Good to see you both. Thank
to see you.
I know. Was this a heavy one today? I don't know. We got into some serious business here.
There's no fun kicker at the end.
There's no one little kicker.
Next time.
Favorite snack food?
Popcorn all the way.
Popcorn?
Salt and vinegar chips.
Thank you. Our Soapbox Social panel, Mo Amir is the host of This is Vancouver. That's the podcast. And Kyla Lee is a criminal lawyer for Acumen Law Corporation.